Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to the Sports Ball Talk Show. Joined by Frank and Gian, of course. Hope you guys had a wonderful...
What's good?
Yeah, what's good? It's good. There's Gian. Hope you guys had a wonderful Christmas. Bad weather all over the country. I think 60% of the country was under severe weather advisory, so I hope everyone's okay. I know there were some bad storms up in New York, particularly the Buffalo area. Killed a few people, so prayers out to those people, and hope everyone else is staying safe. Pipes are bursting everywhere. My old apartment complex, every single pipe in every single apartment burst, and now everyone's stuff is ruined in every single unit. So hey, good, I don't live there anymore. We're going to talk about Bum of the Week first. Usually this is like our third or fourth segment, but this week it's such a big one that we're going to talk about it again. And preface, we're reusing a guy which we said we wouldn't do unless it was that bad, but this week it was that bad.
It was that bad. It was that bad. And this one's a little bit different because we're going with the Broncos, but specifically Russell Wilson, and more specifically Nathaniel Hackett, because Russell Wilson has played like poo-poo all year, but some of that has to be attributed to Nathaniel Hackett because of his horrible play calling, which led to him getting fired. So this past week, the Rams and the Broncos played each other. They're against Baker Mayfield. Rams came out, 2 weeks ago with Baker Mayfield, had a great game. I mean, not a great game, but good enough to win with that 2-minute drive by Baker Mayfield. Last week, they didn't play so well, and I was like, okay, yeah, Baker's kind of settling in, that kind of stuff. And so this week, we were like, yeah, Broncos are probably going to win this one. I think, everyone except for Frank. So Gian and I both picked the Broncos to win and cover. That did not happen. The spread was only 2.5. The Broncos lost 14-51. The Rams scored 51 points on the Broncos. The Broncos are supposed to have a great defense. Russell Wilson had, 2 or 3 interceptions in this game. Yeah. So, Russell Wilson played horribly. And what resulted from this game is that Nathaniel Hackett got fired. So Baker Mayfield got Nathaniel Hackett fired. One touch and the 3 interceptions. Baker Mayfield, hey, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love Baker Mayfield. He is the third MVP, so he's in an elite class that only 3 NFL players in history can say, that being Mitch Trubisky, Dak Prescott, and now Baker Mayfield. So he's in probably the most elite class of quarterbacks that have ever played the game of football. You got like your MVP, and you got your Hall of Fames, but how many people have won MVP? A lot. How many people have been a first ballot Hall of Famer? A lot. How many people have won the MVP? 3. That is the tightest group that has ever been classed by the NFL or by Nickelodeon, depending on how you want to look at it. But he won it, and he deserved it because cooking up 51 points against this Broncos defense, which has been good all year, horrible. Nathaniel Hackett got fired, like we said. He was supposed to be, I should say. I wouldn't say he was, because he wasn't anything but a waste of money on the Broncos end. But the richest NFL owner, the Broncos, decided, let's go get this offensive guru from the Packers, Nathaniel Hackett, who had brought Aaron Rodgers a back-to-back MVP season. It makes sense. You think this guy who has the back-to-back MVPs running that show, let's go get that guy to be our head coach. Well, I guess they didn't realize that was on the back of Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, and so whenever he lost those two and had a completely new system with Russell Wilson, who's not as good as Aaron Rodgers, you've got Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, who are not as good as Devontae Adams, you've got your tattered running back core, which has been beat up all year, which is not as good as A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. You don't have Matt LaFleur, who I think Matt LaFleur is a pretty good coach overall. Not the best, but he's pretty good. You lose all that and you're running your own thing. You're just not as good. It's kind of like whenever Matt Nagy was offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, was insane, and then he went and started coaching in the Bears and they sucked. I mean, he had, I guess, one good season, but they were not a very good team with Matt Nagy, so he lost his job from there. But it's just interesting how this happens. I think kind of a lot where usually they pick an offensive coordinator as opposed to someone else, but usually like what happens is someone will be very, very good, like let's say the best defense in the league. Someone will go and hire their defensive coordinator to be their new head coach, or if they have the best offense in the league next season, they'll get hired as a head coach. And usually that doesn't work out. And this is a prime example of that happening because Nathaniel Hackett is horrible. As much talent was on this Broncos team, which injuries obviously are there. Russell Wilson's not with his old system. Got to have new chemistry, all that stuff. And I said that at the beginning whenever I said that I didn't think the Broncos were going to make the playoffs. But as bad as they've been, there's no excuse. I mean, I didn't expect them to have 4 wins all season. I expected them to maybe be in the 6-7 range. But this is embarrassing, especially the margin that they're losing these games is on the back of Nathaniel Hackett. And I'm excited to see what Russell Wilson can do with him gone, honestly. I still don't think Russell Wilson to be that good, but it's kind of exciting to see if he can step up a little bit from that. So he's Bum of the Week. Baker Mayfield got this guy fired, and he is the third MVP. What are you guys' thoughts on the whole situation? I thought that
this should have happened a while ago. I think that the Broncos have been playing poorly enough all year that this warranted consideration halfway through the season, so that they could have gotten ahead of this. But now here we are at the end of the season, and I think there's 2 weeks left to play, a week left to play, and they're left scrambling for people. Now it doesn't look as bad as it could be, maybe because they could hire Sean Payton and Vic Fangio, as their defensive coordinator. Fangio, I think, coached the Broncos last year, if I'm not mistaken, so he already kind of has, that connection there and knows what's going on. But I think that one of the reasons, kind of like you were saying before, they had hired, Hackett was because of Aaron Rodgers, and they were trying to, get that elite quarterback to come to their team, because that's what it seemed like. That was all that they were missing, was an elite quarterback. And then they get Russell Wilson, and they're like championship or bust, and it has certainly been a bust so far this season. I mean, the scoring that the Broncos had was from absolutely just nothing. Like, they had 2 field goals, and then they had a 11-yard touchdown pass in the fourth quarter, and that was literally the only time that the team looked even like somewhat okay. So I think Nathaniel Hackett deservedly is the bum of the week. He is one of a lot of NFL coaches that I think this season will be losing their jobs, but glad that he lost it now, because I like the Broncos. I wanted to see them do well, but unfortunately, that was not their season. So they did not ride.
Yeah,
Gio.
and I agree with you, Frank. I mean, from the get-go, I knew Hackett was a hack. For me, he's bum of the year. On paper, this Broncos team was supposed to be an absolute monstrosity. And then look here, some of the players, you have great players like Jerry Jeudy, who in training camp they were saying was unguardable. Obviously, he got hurt sometime in the year and they couldn't use him. But in this game, put up 117 yards on 6 receptions, and he still got studs like Courtland Sutton, Greg Dulcich, the tight end. He had a good game, okay game, better said. But I mean, at this point, the coaching was terrible. I knew it was bad from the get-go. Simply, I believe it was a game early on in the year where they had terrible time management at the end. There was a whole minute and they let the clock run down, but they still needed to get the first down. And
that was the first or second one of the week, and that was actually really funny because I don't know if you guys watched the Manning brothers commentary of it. Peyton Manning sitting there the whole time let's get a timeout here. Let's get a timeout going. Let's get a timeout. I think he said it 50 times in 30 seconds. Let's get a timeout going. Come on, let's get a timeout going. You're probably going to call a timeout. Probably going to call a timeout, save some clock. It was hilarious. It was amazing.
And then I was furious. And then every Broncos game this season, for the most part, has been terrible or boring to watch.
A snooze fest. Absolute snooze fest.
Absolute slugfest. It was not good. And I mean, you have, on paper, you have one of the best offenses and defenses, player by player, but Russ hasn't done anything for them. Hackett really didn't show his offensive coordinator prowess at all. He wasn't really a team leader at all. Honestly, good riddance. I think he was an absolute bum from the get-go. Bum of the year for me. And hopefully, and then Russ as well was a bum for me. Honestly, I would have just stuck it out with Drew Lock this year, just because he knew the system a little more than Russ did. I mean, because his performance,
that's the thing. That's the thing about it is kind of going back to what Frank said, because he brought up 2 interesting points that I wanted to talk about. They brought in Nathaniel Hackett, and a lot of people said it was to try and entice Aaron Rodgers and or Devontae Adams to go to the Broncos, which there was rumors for both of them to do so. And so I think they hired Hackett to kind of try to keep the trio together. It didn't work because they're like, okay, well, now that we got him, we kind of have to go out and get some elite quarterback. And the Seahawks were done with Wilson. Everyone on that team was done with Wilson. Wilson was apparently a horrible team player. He had beef with Pete Carroll, had beef with Sherman whenever he was on the team. He had beef with everyone. No one liked Russell Wilson, so it was kind of time for him to get out of there. And so look at that as an opportunity. He was like, okay, Russell Wilson, skill-wise, not as good as Aaron Rodgers, but he's a top 10 at least quarterback in the league, so let's go get him. And then it's like, yeah, we don't get Devontae Adams, but we still have Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. Like you said, he's unguardable. No one can get to this guy, best route runner, all this stuff. And it didn't work out. The other point is Sean Payton. Sean Payton has been a piece of the puzzle silently this entire NFL season, because as soon as he, quote, retired from the Saints, everyone instantly knew he's taking a year off because he knows the Saints suck and he's going to go get a job somewhere else because he knows he can. The immediate reaction from everyone was he's going to go down to the Dallas Cowboys because they've got a good system going, and that's where he can go and win a championship. But now that Big Mike McCarthy's doing well, Dan Quinn's got that defense doing really well, I don't think they go and make a head coaching switch because they don't need to. Mike McCarthy's doing fine. Mike McCarthy has insane experience, just like Sean Payton. He's been to a Super Bowl. He's been to the playoffs a lot of times with the Packers, with Aaron Rodgers. So it's like they don't need that. This is a place that people have been talking about, and you said the same thing with like Vic Fangio. That's a guy who has been in talks with Sean Payton. He's kind of like building the pieces for his team. It's kind of rumored that wherever he goes, probably the Broncos, he's going to come in there and basically rehire every piece of the coaching staff and make that team his, which I think that this is probably the number one pick for that right now, because still on paper they have a fantastic team. Get him healthy next year, get some good play calling for Russell Wilson, and that skill score. Javonte Williams will be healthy again, and I think that's a place that they can do pretty well.
That's a great point that you bring up about the play calling too, because when you look at who did he coach for most of his time in New Orleans, right? Drew Brees, another very similar quarterback to Russell Wilson, at least physically, right? His play is very similar. I think Wilson's probably a little bit better on his feet than Drew Brees was. Drew Brees probably had a little bit better pocket presence than Russ did, or Russ does, but again, like two out of three quarterbacks, actually, Baker Mayfield I think is the other one, but 2 out of 3 quarterbacks that are under, I think, 6'1" in the NFL. And so, having been used to that in New Orleans, I think that Sean Payton will kind of take a lot of those lessons that he got from there and move them to the Broncos. Again, I love that match, because I think that he'll really be able to get the most. If they can go and get a good running back this season, I think that the Broncos are right back in the midst of it this next year. Because that's really all that Sean Payton needs to make a team good. So,
well, that's the final piece of this thing before we move on is, let's say Nathaniel Hackett was the issue, the only really big issue besides like injuries, and of course everyone plays bad sometimes. But let's say that was the issue. Russell Wilson's not a bum. His receiving core is not a bum. It's just Nathaniel Hackett. Then I think next year, if they get Sean Payton, who we know is a good coach, he's proven it year after year after year for a decade. He's one of the best coaches in the league, up there with Andy Reid and Bill Belichick, as Mike McCarthy, as a few of the best coaches in the 2010s. I think that's a time where they can go on a run and get 12 wins in a season, if that's the issue. But only time will tell. Maybe he goes there, maybe he doesn't. Maybe Russell Wilson is still washed, and maybe they get a few more wins next season because they have Sean Payton, but not enough to make it worth it. But we'll see next season. But we're going to go ahead and move on to the next thing. And this is